Today on Home Care Heroes and Day Service Stars, we're going to talk about what home care and adult daycare leaders should know about artificial intelligence, and whether this is brand new for you or something that you're using every day. I think that you'll learn something important here. Enjoy.
Welcome to the Home Care Heroes and Day Service Stars podcast. If you provide services to keep older or disabled people living at home, then this podcast is for you. Now, here's your host, Ken Accardi.
All right, so hi, and welcome to a new episode of the Home Care Heroes and Day Service Stars podcast. So today's going to be a little bit different than normal. Usually I have a guest on the podcast and I'm asking them questions about, what they do and all that sort of thing. But my team actually asked me if I could do a podcast to talk about the future of AI in home care. And I said I would do that, but what am I supposed to do? Interview myself? So obviously not. So I brought one of my great team members. Her name is Sowpha Umashankar. And welcome, Sowpha. How are you today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much, Ken, for agreeing to this. I'm so excited for our podcast.
All right, perfect. So with that, I think you had put together a set of questions about, kind of this topic of the future of AI in home care, and I'll just like give you the show and let you, ask the questions, and I hope I can answer them.
Awesome. So looking forward to this podcast. Okay, just jumping right up into the questions. So we're going to explore the future of AI in home care. First up, the question that we prepared for is, some people have the mindset that AI is not for me. I will never want to use AI. What would you say to them?
Well, I guess the first thing I'd say is that whether you realize it or not, you are using AI every day. And let's kind of talk about some things. Like, so if you ever shop on Amazon, for example, and you buy something, it's going to say, oh, well, people who bought this also bought that, and things like that. Or if you watch a movie on Netflix, it's going to say, oh, well, since you watched this movie, you might like to watch that movie, and those types of things. So these are examples of AI, and this is kind of I'll call that old school AI, right? Like it's this kind of AI is called machine learning. You don't even need to remember that part, but bottom line is, if you think of those two things, Netflix telling you what you might want to watch, or Amazon telling you what else people buy, they're really just using statistics, right? They're saying, okay, well, let's just look at the statistics out there and let's try to make predictions and decisions with those statistics. And there's just a lot of other places. Like, I guess one thing is that, all of a sudden you had an Amazon Alexa and you could talk to it, right? And it would give you answers. And in the early days of Amazon Alexa, it wouldn't understand your questions. And people who still have one of those, like when they just say Alexa by accident, she starts talking to you. It's a little bit annoying, but that was that. And, of course, other voice, conversational things like Siri is another way. I'll give you another one. When I used to, have to go to the bank to deposit a check, right? So here's my check and that kind of thing. And now I can just pop it into, well, originally, then the next step was you could go to the bank machine and you could put it in. Like if I go to the Bank of America, it just reads the check and it says, oh, it looks like this is a check, for you for $120. Is that right? And then it'll put it in your bank. So it's reading your check, using AI. And so that's just like, everyday AI that you're using. And now again with the checks that, if I ever get a check now, I can just take a picture of the check with my phone. I never even have to take the check to the bank, and I take a picture of the front and the back, and it makes sure, and it says, oh, you didn't sign the check, right? So it's, so that's another example of AI. And so like in our everyday lives, it's happening all the time. So yeah.
Wow, I didn't really recognize these many patterns. I mean, like whenever Amazon would show me one of these to pick for my cart, I would just go ahead. I didn't know that was actually learning. It was actually learning from my behavior. That was a really interesting call out. Um, Let's bring it more specifically into home care and home and community based services. We work in a business that is based on personal relationships. So, why would we even consider bringing AI into the business?
Okay, yeah, that's a great question. So, yeah, we are a personal relationship business. I mean, everything we do is about caregivers, or if we're in disability services, direct service workers, or our staff at a day center, they're all hands-on working with our folks, right? They're making their lives better. And your skills, probably as an agency leader listening to this, are, those people skills. You've generated those relationships in your community with those referral sources and all that kind of thing. And a lot of people who run and work in home care agencies, you're not really tech people, you're right. So it's like, oh my God, I don't need any more tech. I don't need any AI. But I guess just to the point that, is in your question, Sowpha, is that, really personal relationships requires time to, participate in those personal relationships, right? So the way that you should think of AI is like as an assistant to you. So like, what are things that are taking up your time that maybe the AI can help you with, right? Because if you're, forget about AI for a minute, but if you're sitting in your business and you're figuring out, your billing manually, or if you're entering your claims manually, or any of those kinds of things, that is keeping you away from that personal relationship side. You would rather be out recruiting the best caregivers, doing a job fair, building relationships in your community. So if you could, first of all, have some AI that's helping you with approving visits, or you have some AI that's, helping you with screening resumes or something like that. Any of that time that it takes away from you being with people, whether that be, with your clients, understanding their needs, or with your caregivers and coaching them and observing them, and, and showing them that they're special and all those kinds of things, then, that's kind of how AI can help you, is by taking those boring and mundane things off of your plate and giving you more time for more personal relationships.
I think that's fantastic. Just, like optimizing some of these repetitive tasks, AI could really be beneficial to us. And on that note, for some of the audience that's listening to this podcast, we have a mix of some people who are using AI and other people who aren't using it yet. If someone wanted to try it out, what do they need to do?
Okay, great question. How do I answer this? I guess I could kind of show you, but a lot of people will just be listening to the podcast. But I guess we'll do both. I'm going to bring up a screen on the web here, and we're going to go into, well, I guess, like, I would say the poster child of AI is this one that you've heard about on the radio a lot of times, even if you haven't used it, called Chat GPT. So what I'm going to say you could do, and those of you, who are watching this on YouTube, you'll be able to see what I'm doing, but otherwise I'll talk through it, is I'm going to a screen, and all right, so I'm sharing a screen. I'm going to Chat GPT. So you would go to chatgpt.com. And what it's going to bring you is a screen that looks kind of like Google, right? And it's like, and it just says, ask anything. Where should we begin? Ask anything. And so I'm typing in here, my son is learning uh, his multiplication tables. Well, I can't type fast enough. Multiplication tables up to 8 times 8. Can you make a quiz for him? All right, so I've typed that, and now I spelled multiplication wrong, but I don't even think that'll even matter. All right, but now I'm sending that up to ChatGPT, and it said, absolutely, here's a fun and simple multiplication quiz for your son, covering facts from 1 times 1 up to 8 times 8. And it looks like it just gave me this answer. And so it gave me 20 questions, 3 times 4. And I could like print this out, and I can say, okay, 3 times 4 is 12, 7 times 2 is 14, 6 times 6 is 36. And I can go through and answer all the questions. And yeah, so that's all you really need to do. And when it says ask me anything, like you could ask it pretty much anything, and it will, probably give you a surprisingly good answer.
I think that's really, really fun to use, and it's being incorporated on a regular basis. So, on that note, we have another follow-up question for you. Like, what's the difference between what you just did with ChatGPT and a Google search?
Okay, so a slightly complicated answer here, but so basically, when you search Google, you are getting, it's looking at all kinds of things on the internet and it's trying to bring you the best thing on the internet. So, so you're asking a question and it's saying, oh, okay, great. You just asked about multiplication tables. Here's something about multiplication tables, and it's from LinkedIn Learning or it's from Khan Academy or whatever, somebody who's done a really good job teaching you that, or maybe it's from Wikipedia, and it's trying to find like the best thing that it could give you. And but it's something that somebody wrote, and it's sitting out there somewhere on the internet. And but when you are asking ChatGPT, so ChatGPT had like it went, and it's going to sound crazy, science fiction-y, but ChatGPT went out and it read the entire internet and learn from it, right? So it sounds like a sci-fi movie, but it really understands all this stuff for you. So it's just going to try to, answer your question from everything that it's learned from a whole bunch of different places, and it's going to synthesize different things together and use, the knowledge, let's say, that it's gained from reading the whole internet to give you a more comprehensive answer. And I guess, now that I've answered it, it doesn't sound that complicated, but what I will say is that Google is a really strong AI company, but their AI, by the way, is, I think, well, it's been called Gemini, and they're renaming it or something. But bottom line is, like, with Google, AI has been a little confusing the way they rolled it out, because people use Google for Google, and they've been trying to give little AI answers in the beginning before your search results, and it's been a little bit confusing. So I think that people maybe prefer to go to ChatGPT because you're going to ask a question, you're going to get one answer. You're not going to get a list of answers and then also an AI answer and that kind of thing. But don't lose track of Google. I mean, they're good. They're really, really good in AI. Arguably, I mean, they could be better than the Chat GPT company, which is called OpenAI. And so so don't take your eyes off of them. They're super good.
Absolutely. I think that's a brilliant, brilliant answer. So, do you also talk to AI, and can you show us how to do that?
Okay, you're throwing me for a little curveball there, but yeah, you could talk to AI. Let me actually I have my phone here. Let me go to Chat GPT on my phone. And actually this will work well for the podcast because people can um, basically hear what we're talking about. I'll have it so we can talk to it and so that it can answer. And let's try this. Hi, ChatGPT, can you hear me? Okay, fantastic. Yeah, so I my wife said that she had this cocktail and it was called a Negroni, and I have no idea how to make a Negroni. Like, could you tell me how to make that cocktail for her?
Course. Grody is a cocktail, super easy to make. You just need 3 ingredients in equal parts: gin, Campari, and sweet vermouth. Here's how you do it. Combine 1 ounce of gin, 1 ounce of Campari, 1 ounce of sweet vermouth in a mixing glass with ice. Stir it well until it's chilled, then strain it into a rocks glass over a big ice cube. Garnish it with an orange peel, and you're good to go. It's a perfect balance of bitter, sweet, and botanical flavors.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Yeah, so
Well,
you could talk to it as well, and it'll give you a good answer. So yeah, that was a good curveball, but yep, you could talk to it as well. And by the way, like when you set it up, it'll ask like what kind of voice you want to talk to. So I chose the upbeat British woman.
well, I really hope we're all invited for the Negroni cocktails. And moving on. So, what would be 3 things that a home care manager can do with AI?
Hey, perfect. So yeah, so again, the way to think about it is like what is something that's taking a lot of time, right? So like let's say that you see this great article or something that you want to read, and but it's like 5,000 words long, right? So one thing you could do is you could literally just copy and paste that article, into ChatGPT and say, hey, ChatGPT, I don't have enough time to read this article. Can you summarize it for me? Right. And So you could just do that and it'll give you the gist of the article in like, that in something that you could read in like 1 minute. So that would be, you asked for three things, huh? So that'd be one. Another one is that like, we have to do caregiver training and we probably work really hard on caregiver training and we have like whatever, our handouts are and the materials for the training. And you could take those exact materials and you could, just like I did with the 3 times 3 multiplication table, you could say, hey, like I've made this, this new training for the caregivers about reporting if somebody sees abuse of somebody with disabilities. And I want to make sure they understand the materials. Could you give me 3 versions of, 3 quizzes with 10 questions each? And, and give me those 3 quizzes. And then also, could you also make answer sheets like for me so I could, kind of get all that. So that would be a second one. And then, the third one is like, let's say, again, and I guess all of these have been sort of related to reading some information and trying to process it for you. But a third one is, we're hiring people all the time and they might be just like, showering you with resumes. And so think about like, what do you do when you read a resume for somebody, who's either going to be a caregiver or somebody on your staff? And, and then like, what are you reading in that resume? Okay, well, you want to see their experience and you also want to see their, certain values that align with your values, right? So this is a case where, you might want to tell it a little bit more, about yourself. And, you might want to say, hey, you're a home care agency owner and what the way that you differentiate in your home care agency is that you really believe in empathy and in safety. And I want you to, read these resumes and, tell me, who you think would be good caregiver candidates based on, first of all, do they have any experience in home care and reading their resumes and looking for safety and empathy. Do you see, strong indication that they could be a good person for my team since those are my values? And then, with that longer prompt, it might take you a whole minute to write that in there. And then you give it, a resume and you give it the next one. And then, and then it scores them in different ways. So I guess those would be 3 examples anyway to start out. Hopefully those are good enough ones on the fly.
Yes, absolutely. I think they're brilliant. I really didn't think of the resume hack that you mentioned. That's going to be time saving a lot, especially with our home care agencies, managing various tasks. Um, I have another question for you. So, moving on, do you think that AI should be a part of home care software system that agencies use?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, so I guess the next evolution in AI is that it's being, incorporated into different apps. And, and just like we talked about some things that might be time consuming in your life, I mean, there are some things that are, like time consuming in the software. So, for example, we have a lot in Ankota, we have a lot of Medicaid clients. And of course, the visits have to, they have to do EVV, electronic visit verification. And the offices take a lot of time to, review those visits and say, oh, well, this caregiver clocked out late, this one forgot to clock out and, did it after the fact. And, um, and there's all of that. So we, for example, we have an AI approval assistant, right? So it goes through and instead of, you having to look at every single visit, it'll go through and it'll summarize it for you and say, okay, we looked at the visits from yesterday and, your agency did 273 visits and there's 32 of them that have this, some kind of an issue. And of those, there were 17 caregivers who forgot to clock out. Um, and, that's going to need this certain reason codes. You can send it over. And, the AI assistant will help you put those reason codes in there. But yeah, there's other things that like, think of what takes you a lot of time, right? And one would be going to give like a disability services example. So in disability services, for those of you who do elderly home care, is similar, but it's different. And the thing that makes it different is that, in disability services, we're trying to help the person lead, their best independent life in their community and align that with their goals, right? So let's say that their goal is, I want to be able to live in my own apartment, and I want to be able to prepare some food for myself, and I want to be able to, travel to the grocery store and be able to, buy my groceries. And you have a direct service worker, which is usually what they call their caregivers, who's working with this person against these goals. And, and every day as they're kind of reporting what they did, they're saying, hey, independently, this, the person I'm working with, like, they took this on themselves, they did it, or, well, I really needed to help them 3 or 4 times. And as they're putting those notes in, day after day, you could like say, okay, hey, for the month of January, what progress have we made for Brian in his independent living ability, right? And it could look at those notes for all 30 days and give you a nice one-page summary, and say, oh yeah, Brian made great progress on this, and and actually he was getting very comfortable taking the bus to the supermarket. But I asked him, I said, okay, now we're going to try you going on the bus by yourself, and I'm going to drive behind the bus, and I'll be there on the other end. And he would go nowhere near the bus. Okay, so we had that setback, but we had great progress. He's doing really well in being able to use the kitchen, and those types of things. You can see, like, I mean, and the AI could, you'll be amazed, how great a summary it could write for you. And and all that information is in your home care system, because it was put in by the direct service worker or the caregiver, and you could make, really nice summaries of things. And so there's lots and lots of examples of things that you could do, with AI. And I guess though that, while I gave that little demo of, either asking a question to the AI, or, talking to the AI. And as you can see, like in most of the applications, it's kind of like a chat interface, right? And I don't think that home care agency owners, like, they're not going to want to like chat with their software, right? They're going to want their software to do its stuff. But, so what you should be seeing is that, like, there will be like just these AI enabled functions, but you won't even know that they're enabled by, AI. But, if you kind of think about it, if somebody was going to write, specific software to summarize the the care experience for Brian over a 3 month period, that would be some really hard software to write, but that's something that AI handles, really well. So I don't know if I answered the question well enough, but that's just an example.
So I felt like that was a very comprehensive answer, and now I have another follow-up. So it sounded really good, but I've heard that sometimes AI makes up answers or makes mistakes. Is it risky to use AI as a part of home care software?
Well, yeah, I think it is risky. Sometimes, there, if you ask AI a question, it and they'll even say that on the screen in ChatGPT, AI might make mistakes and things like that. So I think the trick is that we have to ask it things that are pretty well understood. So if you, for example, if you have used like Google Translate over time, like Google Translate's gotten a lot better and better over time, and and things like that. So like something like taking your care notes from somebody who speaks Spanish, and then summarizing them in English, like that's something that you could trust AI is going to do a really good job on. We're doing like some experiments with things like, take our home care schedule for the week, and take our caregiver, not only our caregiver listing, but how many hours do they want to work, when are they available, where do they live, and all that kind of thing. And we're asking AI, hey, could you look at my schedule and tell me some, give me 10 ideas of how I can make the schedule better. And we're training it with certain things like, well, what would make the schedule better? Well, first of all, if we could reduce overtime, that's great. If we could give the caregivers all the hours they want, that would be great, right? And personally, we want to fill all the shifts, right? We want to accommodate everything that our clients want. And another thing that would be great is if the caregiver didn't have to drive as far. And um, so you can kind of like train the AI in that way. But if you then threw your schedule in there, and there's a lot of value to your schedulers. I mean, they know your clients inside out. They know just intuitively, yeah, this client's not going to like this caregiver, right? And they know that, even though this caregiver is driving a little bit extra to work with, Mrs. Samuel, like she's been working with Mrs. Samuel for 20 years, right? And she's going to drive that distance, and she's not going to want to be, reassigned to a caregiver who's close by. So I think you have to be kind of careful in the way that um, test the AI and that sort of thing. So I feel like, when we release that feature, for example, what it'll be doing is it'll be giving recommendations, and then it'll be, even asking on the screen, how did you like the recommendations, right? And then our customers will tell us, oh, these recommendations were really good. Um, but this one was really bad because, it didn't take into account the long-term relationship between Barbara and Mrs. Samuel. And then we would go back and we would try to refine it, and we would say, okay, well, how do we make the model better? We let it know, maybe as one of the parameters, how many times has this client worked with that caregiver before? And then we see if the model gets better. So we have to be kind of careful as we, use AI and refine it and see how much we trust it. And um, so I guess that's the best answer I could give.
I think it was just amazing to see, how you covered all the biases that maybe AI might have. Um, Now we are in the last and final question. How should a home care owner decide whether to try an AI tool?
Oh, that's a good question. So what I would say is you will see a lot of things now have, like AI, right? They're going to say, oh, there's like, there's going to be like whatever you use, like Instagram AI, and like I use this tool called Canva for making like the graphics on our website and things like that, and Canva AI and all that. And I think the first question you should ask yourself is like the thing that it could do with AI, do I even need to do that? Right. And if the answer is like, I wouldn't do that with AI or without AI, then don't waste your time, right? I mean, you don't need it, right? So look at the things that you are doing and see if it will, I mean, like if you read that, hey, it has AI that does this, and that would be pretty valuable to me, then, give it a try, right? And if it's not quite there yet, okay, then, it's like, okay, well, we gave this one a shot. Let me try it again in 6 months or something like that. I will say, just like as somebody who uses ChatGPT every day, that literally in the last 6 months, it's gotten so much smarter. Like I use it, I would say literally 6 months ago, I would say, hey, like I'm working on this code, what could you say about it? Would give me like advice about writing my code. And now it's like, oh, let me write that for you, right? And it writes it for me, and it writes it, really, really well. And I could ask it harder and harder questions and that type of thing. So I think that, AI is really just in its infancy. And if somebody tries to put an AI tool in there and it doesn't help you too much, like don't give up on it forever, right? Give up on it for 6 months and then give it another try. So that would be my advice.
I think that was really comprehensive, and I got to understand like how it's gotten smarter over the ages. And as someone with in-depth experience using AI, and say you use it on a regular basis, what are some pieces of advice that you would give our listeners of the podcast?
Yeah. So I would say that, when you try it, like maybe test it with some things that you know pretty well, and and see if you like its answer and that sort of thing. Another one is that like whatever it gives you, like I guess one example that I could have given earlier is that all of us want to, gain visual visibility in our community, and all of you have like a home care website, right? So AI is really good at like writing content for your website. So you might say, hey, like could you write me an article um, about like 5 activities that might be interesting for caregivers to do for Memorial Day or something like that, right? And then like read the article when it's done, and it's like, I don't think they understand very well, like that these are, that these are our caregivers, and they're working with, like somebody who's averaging, 81 years old, right? They didn't come up with good activities. And if you feel like it, sort of missed the mark, then just be a little bit careful of it. And I think that there's a lot of things that, if you start using it and you're like, wow, this is good, but it's always good, it's not great, then there's kind of this discipline of things you can learn, and what they call it, for lack of a better name, is prompt engineering. And so what you're doing is, like, when you're asking a question to AI, that's called a prompt, right? And there's a lot of things that you could learn about how to make a better prompt. And some of the best prompts, the first thing you can do in a really good prompt is tell the AI who they are, right? What their job is. So you could say, you are the owner of a disability services agency that aims to help people mostly with autism and Down syndrome and other disabilities to live independent lives in their home. And based on that, like you to write a blog article for my website, on this topic. So the first thing you can tell it is, like, who you want the AI to be. So it kind of thinks about, oh, okay, this is my role. And then you could ask for what you want it to do. And then you can tell it, like, what you want the results to look like. It's like, hey, I'd like my blog articles to be an average of around, 800 words. So it's rich enough, but, but I don't want it to be like 2,000 words, because nobody will want to, spend that much time. I want them to be able to read it in 4 to 5 minutes. Right. So now you've told it who it is, what you want, and, you've kind of put some constraints on what you want the results to look like. So I guess that would be a piece of advice on how to get the most out of AI. And if you feel like you're getting good but not great, just give it more information. And also, like, I'm very polite when I am talking to the AI, which sounds crazy or whatever, but I'm like, oh, thank you, that was really good, but could you do this part better? That's just me. You don't have to. I mean, you're not going to hurt its feelings if you're not really nice to it. You could say that didn't really work very well. You could, this was totally wrong. You just didn't understand. And but yeah, I think the most important thing is that, if you try it, you're going to find that there's things that it could do. I mean, just think of, like, the world before Google, right? And the world after Google, right? If you're old enough for that, Sowpha, you're probably not old enough for that. You probably had Google for your whole life and that sort of thing. But for some of us who are older than that, just think of the world like, how would you live without Google? Or, like, how would you live without Google Maps, right? Like, you used to have to get a map, and that kind of thing. So I think that you're going to like AI as much as you like Google Maps, and as much as you like Google even, once you give it a try and get used to it. So yeah, going back to your very first question, yeah, there's some people who say AI is not for me. I never want to use AI. I think, like, I think you should give it a chance. And I think if you reevaluate, you're going to be like, wow, I'm really glad that I gave that a try.
I think that was a really, really awesome set of answers, Ken, and thank you for like diving deep into your experience and giving us ways to use this for like home care agencies and how it could help us on a regular basis, optimizing our tasks. So thank you so much for this time. And do you have any few words to say for our listeners?
Well, yeah, again, it was kind of interesting, kind of backwards, because usually, I'm the one who's interviewing somebody else, but it was fun to be interviewed today. Thank you, Sowpha. You did a great job. And yeah, so I guess just everybody, yeah, thanks for tuning in, and thanks for your interest in AI of all things. And we wish you a great day.
Awesome. Wishing you a great day. Thank you, Ken.
Thanks for joining us today on the Home Care Heroes and Day Service Stars podcast, produced by Ankota. You can listen to back episodes by visiting 4homecareheroes.com. That's the number 4, then the words homecareheroes.com.